Thanks everyone and good morning. As Eric mentioned, my name is Nick Blanford. I'm a part of Circularity Affects global marketing team, focusing on thought leadership. Over the past 15 years, I've been involved with a wide variety of sustainability measures and initiatives, from institutional investing strategies to carbon reporting, and also with Schneider, obviously, our energy management and energy efficiency solutions. Before we really dive into setting the stage for your day here at Plug, I wanted to kind of talk about the word sustainability. What does it mean? It's quite easy to look at it and deduct the obvious, the ability to sustain something over time. And if you were to Google it or look in the dictionary, you'll see that that's just it. It'll quite simply say it's the ability to sustain, to support, or upheld. But me as a professional in the sustainability industry, I need to go beyond that, because this word that's been overused and generally is an ambiguous term needs to be more clearly defined so that you can actually see real progress towards the desired future. So what does it mean? Like yourselves being involved in the energy industry, we typically start to think about conservation, energy efficiencies. If you're working in specific segments or specific applications, maybe it's process efficiency. Or perhaps, if you're involved in the environmental movement, you're starting to think of conserving, protecting the environment. Perhaps it's more of a personal look for you. You start thinking about nature in general. With me, sometimes I start thinking about the different places I've explored at my home in Vancouver Island. Start thinking about forests environments. Start thinking about the oceans. And if you're from Mississauga or Greater Toronto area, you're probably thinking about the vast lakes that you have here and enjoying time out there with your friends and your families. Sometimes we can take a much larger view when it comes to sustainability. We start thinking about the globe. We start thinking about the different ecosystems that have been sustaining life and its inhabitants for millions, if not billions of years. A lot longer than we've been here. Discussing economics, politics, sports, since we've been here creating our own systems, transportation systems, electric infrastructure, these man-made creations that haven't really been here as long as the planet. It's really only been over the past 100 years that the term sustainability has started to be applied to these systems that we've been creating, starting to look at replicating the success that nature has realized. And truly, it's really only been over the past 40, 50 years when the term sustainable has become synonymous with success. People start talking about sustainable growth, sustainable profits, sustainable energy. People even talk about sustainable Netflix binging. But the thing is that as a sustainable professional, like I mentioned, I need to try and get away from this ambiguous and broad term. We want to start talking and diving into specific aspects of sustainability so that we can get everyone on the same page, so we can start moving towards the vision of success that everyone, no matter who you speak to on this planet, wants. Everyone wants a healthy, prosperous, and in turn, sustainable future that can carry on. So what do? We have to focus on what makes something sustainable. And what that means to me is we start breaking down the characteristics of that. And over time, over many conversations, many research groups and surveys, we've identified that there are 3 areas that primarily stand out with everyone. No matter what business you're involved with, no matter what your day-to-day role is, whether you're at the top of an organization, determining the strategy, the strategic direction, or whether on the day-to-day you're working on a very specific and focused application to help greater the good in the direction towards that idea of success. That's optimization, resiliency, and integrity. And you'll see these universal traits, they're quite abundant when you look to nature, the system that's been sustaining itself for billions and billions of years. So I'd like you to keep these in mind as we move forward throughout this presentation today, throughout your day here at Plug, and hopefully you can take this new lens, this new kind of concept of sustainability back with you. So my goal here for today, over the next 30 or so minutes, is that I want to try and have you look at sustainability different. I want you to reimagine sustainability. I know many of you probably don't even think about the term on the day-to-day, but perhaps you do. But I'm hoping that the ideas and the traits of sustainability will resonate with you, that you can see how it will be applied to your business and to your personal lives, so that you can see better results from both. Now, where do we start? We have to paint a picture of where we currently are. Our current reality, unfortunately, is pretty grim. Unless you've been living underneath a rock, you're probably aware of many climate change effects that have been affecting everyone across the world, across the globe, and including here in Canada. We see sea level rise affecting communities in Bangladesh, Ireland, the Netherlands. We're seeing flooding affecting us quite locally here in Eastern Canada. We're starting to see widespread drought resulting in water scarcity, which can also lead to migration and different conflicts around the world. We're starting to see once-in-a-century storms that people thought would only be happening once in a lifetime, if that, happening on a more frequent and regular basis at a more powerful level, including Hurricane Michael and Florence that just happened down the south and across the eastern seaboard. And all this really results in displacement of people. We started seeing climate change, refugees, and migration of people affecting other communities, other regions around the world when their homes were upturned or destroyed. And in Canada, like I mentioned, we're not immune. Alberta and BC have been experiencing wildfires at an unprecedented scale and an unprecedented rate. Alberta has been actually experiencing two of the most expensive and costliest natural disasters in Canadian history. In 2016, they experienced the Fort McMurray wildfires that cost an estimate of about $10 billion in the Canadian economy. In 2013, the Alberta floods came in at about $6 billion. And over the past 18 months too, flooding in eastern and central Canada is estimated to have cost the Canadian government approximately $3 billion in climate. So we're not immune, and as you can see from these images, the people that are affected are starting to become our friends, our families, and our communities. So it's really starting to strike a chord close to home. And unfortunately, this is the reality. This isn't changing, so we can get worse. This is backed up by the latest IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. This came out with an updated version of the report several weeks ago. And if you have the time to read through the 1,200 pages, or as I prefer to go through the Coles notes, you'll see that the results that they're talking about are a lot worse than anticipated and expected earlier. So as a business, like Schneider Electric, working with other partners and customers and other groups, we have to see and ask ourselves, what do these effects have on business? What do they have on the business environment? And well, after various consultations and research groups, we've identified 4 megatrends that are affecting businesses as the result of our current reality. The first is that we have an increasing need to decouple economic growth with environmental impacts. And what this really means is looking at facilitating resource optimization to reduce the threats to businesses over time. Now, how many of you have heard of Earth Overshoot Day? Just a simple raise of hands. Anyone? Earth Overshoot Day? A couple of you? Well, Earth Overshoot Day is a day that happens every year, and they've been tracking this for over a decade. And what that day is this moving date in the year. Once we hit that date, we've used up the Earth's resources and its capacity to sustain humans and society for that given year. In 2018, Earth Overshoot Day was August 1st. So we're currently living on borrowed time. We're currently going above and beyond the Earth's capacity to sustain the 7 billion plus humans on this planet. They estimate that in 2018, we're going to use 1.7 Earths. Certain economies around the world, certain regions are using more than that, so we're using a lot less, but that is the average. Obviously, new business models need to be adapted and enabled by technology to change this, to adapt. The second is evolving disclosure requirements. Typically in the past, financial reporting was what investors and stakeholders have looked to for businesses, and over time, over the past 10, 20 years, they started to dive a bit deeper. They started looking at supply chains, they started looking at labor practices, they started asking for different types of CSR, corporate sustainability reporting on these companies to get more visibility into what these organizations are doing. They're asking for more data, they're asking for more data points, so they can make their own informed decisions. And of course, this is resulting in many more man-hours to try and accumulate this information and present it in an easily digestible manner. And what we're starting to see is we're starting to see technology being able to assist and catalyze that data collection and that presentation of information. Again, technology is trying to help us address this. The third is public pressure and the importance of customer engagement. And what that means is that customers can be fickle. Myself, I typically do my due diligence when it comes to any type of purchasing decision, regardless if it's a small one. And over the years, we've seen customers express an interest in sustainable products and practices. More so over the past handful of years, we're starting to see customers and consumers starting to act on these behaviors. They're starting to seek out sustainable brands. They're starting to look for sustainable products. They're starting to assess what's in those products and what are these companies doing when they produce it. So clearly, as we see this engagement rising, they're starting to seek out this information. Technology and digital platforms are providing space for community and for that back and forth. They're starting to treat companies more like humans. They're starting to ask questions. They're starting to come with specific questions and expecting to get specific solutions. So we start seeing this online dialogue happening that is taking and developing a more intimate customer relationship. The fourth is digitization, decentralization, decarbonization, and electrification. As everyone in here probably has a cell phone, they probably may have a smartwatch. The growing devices that are connected is something that is also a reality that we live in. And because of this increasing digitization, the need for electrification goes hand in hand. And because of this disruption on businesses, we start to see the decentralization of certain teams and responsibilities. Employees start to become more autonomous, they start being informed better by the data accessible to them, and they start to get more responsibility to make their own decisions and move forward. It allows for more flexible organization, it allows for employees to be seen as trusted partners in the organization, which can also help for talent retention and for building and creating powerful leaders within organizations. And what we're seeing is that leading organizations are starting to recognize these four trends. And when they are looking at these trends, like any other business and any other group, they're really starting to seek out the opportunities that arise from these trends. And they're using technology to enable this. Specifically, digitization, like I mentioned, and interconnectivity. And these two elements are driving powerful ways to adapt and capitalize on these opportunities. And in turn, after many kind of conversations with different customers, as well as different groups, we started to identify three main areas of opportunity for businesses that exist. The first is resource optimization. Older systems are being replaced by newer ones, they're being updated. We're starting to see that connectivity with different devices provide more visibility into infrastructure. Customers are saving money on operational efficiencies, improved data collection, decreased manufacturing, and supply chain waste. It is said that businesses who decrease their overall energy consumption by 30 to 40% typically reduce costs by 10%. These solutions also help drive down CO2 emissions. They start to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. They also increase efficiencies, provide that holistic view so you can make informed decisions to optimize your processes and your material usage and reducing your waste. To take on a more active role, Sal's needed to be siloed and break down those barriers that exist. And typically when we talk about this and this movement from these silos to like a more comprehensive and shared vision of success, we talk about active energy management. And that typically evolves around looking at three different groups within organizations that focus on procurement, efficiencies, and sustainability. These individuals may be locking themselves with their own goals, but when we break that down and demonstrate a shared vision of success, we typically see these groups and organizations investing for the long term to reduce costs. They start treating energy as an asset as opposed to a cost. And we start seeing new business models arising where they can use those savings to help fund new projects and initiatives. They also start using more connected devices to gather data and again provide more powerful analytics so that they can make those informed decisions. And everyone's doing it. Hotels and hospitality. There's very little incentive for a hotel guest to adapt efficient behaviors. They rarely see or directly bill for the utilities energy bill. Energy industry groups in the hospital and hospitality sectors have said that 40 to 80% of energy consumption happens in the guest rooms. Yet, these guest rooms are empty for 60 to 65% of the day. So now imagine a hotel that can monitor, make the energy use more efficient, while optimizing guest comfort. There's an example of an organization in hotel tourism such as Fort Garry in Winnipeg. They had the problem of wanting to, or the goal I should say, of wanting to reduce guest complaints while optimizing operational and energy efficiencies. What they did is they approached a Schneider partner and they discussed this with them. So in turn, after deploying various sensors and building management software to optimize the user and guest environment, they realized a 20% reduction in energy usage. They've seen a 25% reduction in maintenance staff hours. They've also seen a significant decrease in customer complaints. Now, the industrial environment is different than the hospitality sector, yet they still view sensors and data collection as key to productivity, performance, and to resource management. You know, when you start deploying sensors at various lines, various processes, and various aspects of an industrial environment, you start to see smart manufacturing. You start getting that data optimized, you start seeing different efficiencies, and you start reducing that waste. You start seeing a common theme between this resource optimization. And data centers, where they inherently have sensors everywhere within their environments, it's an even more important space because they start to correlate power, cooling, as well as different space requirements so they can take preventative measures to prevent actual physical issues with their equipment. In these environments, we typically see energy costs sometimes outweighing the actual cost of the IT infrastructure itself. So they can start making better informed decisions, more informed decisions. They can prevent actual physical damage, and they can actually optimize uptime, which is what they guarantee towards their customers. Even the entertainment industries are doing this.
Why should entertainment be more sustainable? It's not only an expectation from our employees, guests, and sponsors, but sustainability to AEG means innovation and operational efficiency. We have over 50 million guests and 22 of the top 100 venues in the world. Energy is our second largest expense at AEG, so we need to be able to properly manage it. I am Scott Bossard, Senior Vice President of Business Services. We believe it's important to think in an integrated way about how we both buy and use energy and other resources more efficiently and sustainably. Schneider Electric has provided an impartial and honest assessment on the market and advice with specific recommendations. Our relationship is a true partnership. Resource Advisor is a platform that allows us to assess all these different operational efficiencies that reduce our footprint and save us some real money. More informed decisions on all levels makes us a more profitable and sustainable company. Some key benefits since we implemented Resource Advisor is a 63% waste diversion rate across all of our owned and managed venues, and a 23% reduction in water usage per attendee since 2007, and that already is exceeding our 2020 goal.
So, as you can see, responsible use of resources has a positive impact on business bottom line and reputation. This also ushers in a new manageable way to address some of our planetary challenges, including climate change and water scarcity. New technology, digitization, can help companies be more efficient and less resource intensive, providing economic, environmental, and operational benefits. Now, the second area of opportunity is resiliency through circularity. And this typically, in conversations that I've had, focuses around increase or improve return on assets. You know, the future viability and success of any organization depends on navigating risks. And a primary risk that involves and includes all businesses is resource scarcity. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development estimates that by 2050, the global economy, will need around 130 billion tons of resources, up from 50 billion tons in 2014. That is overuse of the Earth's total capacity of 400%. Obviously, with that type of consumption, new business models have to be made. They estimate that with changing to closed-loop systems and closed-loop cycles, that by 2025, $1 trillion can be saved. And that really requires a new way of looking at doing business. Does anyone here know who this woman is? Does this woman look familiar to anyone? No? This is Ellen MacArthur. This is her boat. And in 2005, she set a new world record for the fastest solo non-stop sailing trip around the world. Now obviously during this non-stop sailing trip, she really developed an appreciation and understanding for finite resources. And out of that experience came her desire to shift the global economy from a flawed system of consumption to one of regeneration. She worked with different industry professionals who were starting to explore biomimicry and circularity, and they developed the concept of circular economy. An economy that strives to ensure that resources are used as efficiently as possible and that anything of value is put back into these cycles before being prematurely discarded. It's focused on remanufacturing, reusing, recycling, and really trying to squeeze every last bit of value out of something before it's actually eventually discarded. This is quite logical when you start thinking about it, logical at almost every level. Especially when you start looking at how circularity affects ROI. Now, to dive into some examples here, the automotive industry. The European auto manufacturer Renault has been remanufacturing parts since the mid-20th century. And today, it's diversified its output to include injectors, gearboxes, and turbo compressors. And there's a benefit to doing this. The final product of remanufactured parts are seen to be 30 to 50% less expensive. And the process of remanufacturing uses 80% less energy, 88% less water, and over 90% less chemical products. This is the kind of ROI that happens when you start thinking in circularity. Another example is the clothing industry, clothing and apparel industry. And Nike has been investigating the impact that its operations and products have had on the environment for over a decade. One of their initiatives that they have is that by 2025, they want to have all their facilities and properties that they've leased running on 100% renewable energy. A second initiative, which is quite interesting, which I'm not sure if any of you have heard of, is called Nike Grind, which is a palette of their recycled premium materials. These are the waste products of manufacturing, the different meshes, the foams, and things like that. And today, Nike Grind materials are found in over 70% of their products. They've even started to partner with different communities to develop gymnasium floors, children's playgrounds, and start really trying to use and maximize this waste and start treating it as raw material. Key benefit is that you see a reduction in companies' operations risk and an increase in resiliency. And it really hedges against rising material costs and operational costs. Circular thinking also has started to become in play in organizations' strategic direction when it comes to facility location. And data centers have taken some pretty innovative ways of where they decide to place the data centers. In Scandinavia, a data center company started scouting out a used mining operation, a used mine. The electrical infrastructure still existed there and it required some minimal updating, but then at the end of the day, they had an extremely secure bunker where they would have their data center operating. Another example is that a data center was recently developed near a community swimming pool, where the excess heat was then used to heat the pool for the whole community to use. This is the type of closed-loop systems with the idea of optimizing resources that we're talking about. Modern business environments often require an understanding that resources are finite. To avoid disruption and other risks, they must adopt new circular ways of producing their goods and supplying their services to society. The good news is, though, companies are starting to do this and starting to think this way. And they're exploring the means to deploy the businesses more responsibly, not only driving their resiliency, but also driving their ROI. The third area of opportunity, as you may have guessed by now, is integrity. And this really focuses on risk mitigation. And over time, every company builds a reputation. And customers are really starting to value company transparency of business processes and optimize supply chain and asset management. Like I mentioned earlier, people are starting to dive into and ask the questions. And the superior trust for organizations that can demonstrate this starts lasting a lifetime. They start developing a customer for life, start building brand ambassadors, start having the customer do their sales for them. This is especially pertinent to businesses that focus on critical services, life safety, and consumer goods. When you start placing responsibility at the center of your operations, focusing on how productivity, operations, and supply affect health and safety, you start engaging your workers, your consumers, the environment, and that becomes more simplified with digitization, and you start seeing long-term prosperity. The responsibility is influencing consumers. People care about sustainable goods and services. Let's consider this. More than 50% of customers prefer sustainable brands. Sustainable brands have started to outpace the market by 120%. And 86% of consumers say that they're more likely to trust a company that reports on their corporate social responsibility results. In this digital age, when a customer is starting to think about making a purchasing decision, 57% of them have already made up their mind before reaching out to a supplier. They're reaching out, and you can see that they're reaching out to organizations that they've done their due diligence on. They've done the research, they've already identified which organization they want to partner with, and they're reaching out to ask some final questions. And that's the way that we live in. That's the age we live in with digitization. Organizations that choose to be more transparent have this inherent opportunity to be selective. And they have the possibility and potential to realize substantial gains when customers can easily discover this information and validate companies' responsibility claims. And that validity builds trust. In today's emphasis on big data, wary customers are more likely to spend their money with companies they believe will use their information more securely and ethically. And that result equals greater consumer trust that has become the new competitive differentiator. It results in long-term business, like I was saying. It starts changing away from a transactional interaction to more of a service-based and more of a sustained partnership with someone. And that obviously benefits the company's bottom line. The health and safety of goods is another critical component of corporate responsibility and consumer trust. Businesses are under constant pressure to be productive, but an ongoing focus on and commitment to health and safety really benefits and produces productivity and a prosperous future in the long run. Consider this. In the US, businesses spend about $170 billion a year on costs associated with occupational injuries and illnesses. In Ontario, in 2017, the Ontario economy and government spent about $2.6 billion. And when looking at different systems to try and mitigate this and try to manage this, health and safety management systems have been seen to reduce these costs by 20 to 40%. Clearly, there is an opportunity. When you start to engage health and safety, you start to engage sustainability, they're very quite similar at a basic level. It's all about the same thing. It's about conserving resources and deploying capital wisely. Progressive companies and employees start to understand this and embrace safety as guiding principles, frequently going beyond the regulations. Excuse me. An example of this is Deloitte's headquarters in Amsterdam. This is the Edge building, and it's one of the most sustainable buildings in the world. It actually produces 102% of its energy. And this is based on its design, it's based on its efficiency measures, it's based on occupancy sensors, the use of natural lighting, and all these different aspects that make this building sustainable and efficient really add to the comfort of being an employee working there. This has obviously played into the idea of attracting and retaining talent and building up your talent workforce and building up your competitive advantage. Another example, closer to home, is over in Quebec at Cascade's cardboard box manufacturing facility. This facility is over 400,000 square feet on one single level. They have about 25 different mechanical thermostats that were then, used by different people, and the maintenance to turn them and set them and to kind of optimize that comfort and level for their employees was very time-consuming and costly. So by replacing these with wireless options and smart thermostats, they're able to have a more comprehensive view on what the heating requirements were to optimize their worker comfort. They also started reducing costs that came to the maintenance time and also to different downtime for individuals to kind of go around and set them to the preset that they like. Now, health and safety of goods is another critical component of corporate responsibility. Businesses are always focused on health and safety aspects of the goods that they're actually providing to the society and to their consumers. Now, what happens if there's a lapse? Well, we start seeing recalls. In the US, one product a day is recalled. And sometimes the consumers don't even know this is happening. Other times they're feeling the ill effects. In 2009, we saw that an outbreak of salmonella in a peanut processing plant resulted in 22,000 customers falling ill. This incident eventually led to a criminal conviction against the CEO. We've also seen more recently that the restaurant chain was plagued by foodborne illnesses, which resulted in its brand being severely damaged as well as falling stock prices. And the customers have spoken. This is a survey that we did with our different customers, and the top 3 responses from customers were that they wanted to see longer product life cycles, the absence of hazardous chemicals in products, and efficient products made with environmentally friendly material. It's clearly important for the future of their business. It is reassuring and obviously reinforcing the aspects of integrating health and safety into your business practices and your strategies. By exceeding your customer expectations for trustworthiness, customers can simultaneously impact their operational costs, improve their revenues, deepen long-term relationships with their customers, and truly develop a competitive advantage that others will have difficulty overcoming. Now, I know I've been speaking about a story about how these climate change effects have resulted in these 4 megatrends that are affecting businesses, and then these opportunities that started to become more evident to progressive companies. And I understand that some of you are very focused on very specific applications in your line of work, but the main goal that I wanted to try and have with you today is that you leave this session with the reimagined sense of what sustainability is in a new lens and the way you look at doing business, the way that you make decisions in your personal lives, and that you can see that business and personal results will be achieved and optimized by doing so. Thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'm open to any questions you may have about anything to do with sustainability.